This week we're going to talk about the concat operator in Pandas, or concatenation. It's how we can glue multiple data frames together in a relatively simple way without some of the more complicated merge and join operations that we'll get to later. Welcome to another MetPy Monday. Hello, I'm John Lehman, a software engineer for Unidata. On this week's MetPy Monday, I'm going to show you concatenation of Pandas data frames. You could think of this really as just stacking data frames on top of each other horizontally or vertically. So we do have to have some size similarity, or at least something that can be made to work together. And you'll see what I mean by that as we go through this example. Now, there are some more powerful operators like merge and join that we'll talk about in next week's MetPy Monday, but this is one that I've used relatively often before making a multi-index data frame or something like that. Maybe I'm stacking a bunch of soundings together. So I'm going to read in a couple of simple fake data example files that I've just made up here to illustrate how to do this. So it's import pandas as PD. Then in my example, I'm going to assume that I have two instruments, one that measures temperature and relative humidity, and one that measures wind speed and direction. My temperature and relative humidity instrument had a reboot in the middle of its recording, so I have two files that I'm going to need to read in and then squish together. And then we're going to read in our wind speed data and attach that as well to get one data frame that we can work with in a unified way. This is something that it took me a while to appreciate when using Pandas. Is really, I don't want a list of data frames or many data frames to be dealing with. I want one data frame that's got everything in it that I can access in an easy way. So let's read in the first file. So data frame, instrument 1, part 1, read CSV, instrument 1, obs 1, df instrument 1 part 2 pd.read CSV instrument 1 obs2.text. Now let's look at these. You could of course create these yourself pretty easily with just a text editor. So part 1 and part 2, we have time 06120. And then the next file is 180/240/300, our air temperature, and our relative humidity. So we want to stack these two data frames vertically, if you will. Basically just whack the header off this and glue it on the bottom right there. So that's exactly what concat does. So I'm going to create a data frame for instrument 1. Now it's going to have all my data in it. pd.concat. Now I pass it an iterable, a list, df instrument 1 part 1, df instrument 1 part 2. And now if I look at data frame instrument 1, it has all of those data in it in one data frame. Now a few points to make here. If you have many things to concatenate together, put them all in one iterable and make one call to concat. The more calls that you make to concat, the slower it is because of a copy operation that happens with every call to concat. So it's much more efficient instead of appending, or concatenating, to do it all in one call. The other thing to notice here is it didn't touch our index. So I'm going to re-index this because I don't like having this repeating index here. In fact, that would make it very difficult to find the 0 index value thing, though it doesn't really make a lot of sense here. I'm going to call df instrument 1.reset index in place is equal to true, and I'm going to drop the old index. Now if we look at df instrument 1, that index has been reset. So let's go ahead and read in our second data file and see what we can do with that. df instrument 2 is pd.read CSV, instrument 2obs.txt, and we see here that we just have wind speed and wind direction. I don't have a time column, but it is the same number of rows as this data file. So all I want to do is take these data and glue it on over here. So instead of vertically stacking, I want to horizontally stack, if you will. So we're going to make an all obs data frame, pd.concat, df instrument 1, that combined data frame that we made, df instrument 2, and I specified the axis is going to be columns. So we want to glue on columns, not rows. And now if we look at the all obs data frame, it's glued those on for us. So that's really convenient, but it only works if we have things that are of compatible shapes. Otherwise, we might have some issues. And in this case, it depends on the times being lined up. Maybe my wind speed instrument doesn't always measure at the same time interval as my air temperature instrument. So those are more complicated operations where we might use something like a merge or a join, which we'll talk about next week. Though I do use concatenate quite a bit when I'm just stacking up, say, mini soundings again before I make it a multi-index data frame or something like that. I hope that you found this video useful, and I'll see you on next week's MetPy Monday.